Yeah, there we go.
Excellent.
All right. So I will get started. Just a little bit about me to kind of introduce myself. My name is Lucas. I am the head of our connected health team at Irdeto, who I'll talk about in a second. Background on myself, I've been in the technology industry for slightly more than 20 years now. Prior to working at Irdeto, I was a contractor working with the Department of Defense, Department of State, spent a fair amount of time traveling to various regions of the world, mainly in the Middle East, working in relatively hostile environments, both from a IT standpoint as well as from a physical safety standpoint. I moved to Europe 13 years ago. I've spent a lot of my life traveling. I really enjoy traveling. So the opportunity to come to Antwerp, which I first came to when I was 14, is something I always welcome. So happy to come back sometime. I have a small, I guess I'd call it a small crew in Amsterdam, 2 older kids, 1 younger kid, 1 cat, 1 dog. Enjoy cooking, enjoy baking. And am a big fan of history, particularly European history. I went to school for history, so it's just a little bit about myself to get started there, lighten it up. Now we dig into the heavy lifting here. About Irdeto. Who is Irdeto? Irdeto is a technology company that's been around for over 50 years. And I love how my timing here really loves to kick off because I've got slides I brought in from other presentations, like this carried their metadata with it. Interesting thing, because I saw your card and it's going to do it again because it's stupid. Stop. Yeah. Just do it like this. No. There we go. All right. I'm going to go like that. I'll wait for the skip. All right. Interesting thing about Irdeto, the name Irdeto is actually IR, the Dutch designation of engineer. Detto is the name of the founder, Peter den Toonder, so it's an anagram of his name and the designation of being an engineer. And so the company really is a very engineering-focused company. We have over 1,000 people in the company. Many of them are in research and development. And we have a number of different ISO certifications, particularly around quality management. My particular piece of the company is focused on healthcare. And so the relevant one for us is ISO 13485. But the company does have a 27001, 9001, and we have a number of patents within our portfolio. I think over 300 patents right now, covering a broad scope of different encryption and security technologies. There we go. Okay, so we go from text heavy to picture heavy. Our expertise is cybersecurity. That is a broad term, and I wouldn't necessarily apply that to every component of our business, but we do have a number of businesses that are focused on cybersecurity. If we look across the kind of portfolio of different business verticals that we're in our video game space, we are the largest processor of online streaming content in the world. We process more streams than Netflix. We are the leading provider of security for video games out there. We work with all the big studios. We have some really interesting security technology, forensic watermarking stuff that's used by the biggest Hollywood studios. You may have seen that during the pandemic, all of a sudden people started to put these like not in movie theater, new release movies out. Well, inside those movies that they were charging people movie theater prices to stream at home had technology from us that allowed them to identify if people were sharing that stuff illegally, and then they could actually track it down just by snippets of the video to the individual person that actually purchased the video. So that's kind of a taste of some of the technology we have there. In the automotive transportation space, we have a number of ventures going on there, working with some of the larger shipping and logistics companies around managing security to physical assets that they have, shipping trucks, long-haul shipping containers, so on and so forth. And then we move into healthcare, and then our software and intellectual property side, just areas where we have a number of different elements within our portfolio. So in the healthcare space, we have divided our portfolio into 4 key sections. I will get to the healthcare challenges. I just wanted to have to do my normal Irdeto kind of who we are, what we are first, and then we'll get into the more interesting stuff. Just kind of quickly running through it. We have a number of professional services. We have a large managed public key infrastructure. We have some of our own proprietary software security technology. We were the patent holder, key inventor for white box technology when it comes to software security. We have our own customized software obfuscation technology for doing source-to-source obfuscation. So we can take source level code, we can add crazy protections inside of it. We can make it so it's very difficult to reverse engineer. A number of large tech companies use this to protect software inside payments and their phones and so on and so forth. The consumer, many devices here have pieces of our technology in it. And then lastly, we have a strong focus on the post-market around what people are doing around software bill of materials, vulnerability, exploitability assessments, and then how they're managing the vulnerability within their kind of post-market quality management processes, as well as providing them with components for device telemetry collection so that they can connect what's happening kind of in the real world with all of the vulnerability data that they're collecting and the stuff that they pull from an SBOM. And all right, so getting into healthcare cybersecurity, I'd like to try to tell a bit of a story. It's clear in the healthcare space that hospitals are big targets for things like ransomware. They're big targets for variety of different malicious online types, folks who are looking to make a quick buck, folks who are looking to be able to exploit them and target them because a lot of them have old infrastructure and they don't have necessarily the resources on their product, well, I say IT security side, to be able to fend themselves off from all the many different threats that are out there. If you look this year, so this is from Checkpoint. This year alone, attacks on healthcare organizations are up over 60%. And you see some of the kind of bigger events that have happened in the past year. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with what happened with the Irish healthcare system, but they were ransomware and the entire Irish healthcare system was down. And then you've had, less significant issues, all those serious ones of, smaller hospital systems in the US and Europe that have been ransomware or have been breached. And that's caused a lot of problems in terms of the overall clinical workflow. Then we come into things like 0 days inside medical devices and how people are addressing that. And that becomes a real challenge in the healthcare space because you can't just quickly patch a device. That's not how it works in healthcare and in medical devices. And so what you end up with is, how do we implement some sort of short-term risk mitigation to be able to control this new security risk that's been identified? Well, we go through the process of building a patch and testing a patch and validating, verifying, and getting that approved and onto out to the devices. So this is specifically around medical devices, not just every single IT device that's out there. But to give you kind of an idea of what hospitals are dealing with, I think I have a slide in here kind of giving an idea of the number of devices that are out there right now. In Europe right now, there's an estimated roughly 10 million connected medical devices in different hospitals. And if you think about the number of devices that are out there, and then you look at kind of the statistics around how many of them have open source components, how many of them have known vulnerabilities right now, how many of them are too old to patch, and how long are they going to be on the market, it's a pretty challenging environment. And so when you look at what the benefits of an SBOM bring to this type of, difficult environment, there's a lot of benefits, but it's a slow moving kind of adoption that's happening here in Europe, and we'll get to that. the vulnerabilities are not just in open source programs, but they're also in a lot of the operating systems. Many medical devices are multi-component. You have a Windows PC that's in kiosk mode that connects to a bunch of embedded hardware devices that are part of an MRI machine or any number of specialized machines. And so you've got Linux, you've got Bluetooth, you've got Windows, all these components together into a large medical device, and the potential for hundreds to thousands of potential vulnerabilities spread across these different systems. So there's a very big kind of problem there. Oh, wrong one. Here we go. Back up. Nope. Did I don't know why. There we go. All right, so I think to understand where the industry is today with SBOM, it's good to kind of get an idea of the gradual maturation of cybersecurity within the overall healthcare space, particularly as it pertains to medical device manufacturers. So we can go back further and we can see that the FDA has had this on its radar. Clearly, here in the EU, it's been a topic, but it really has accelerated in the last 5 or 6 years. So we have updated guidances coming from the FDA as far back as 2016. First pre-market cybersecurity guidance coming out in 2014. We've got the EU MDR that was passed in 2017. So that's the medical device regulation. If you're not familiar with it, that added a whole new host of responsibilities for medical device manufacturers. And it incorporates this concept of state-of-the-art. State-of-the-art being what is kind of the distillation of best practices within the industry for dealing with specific things that aren't articulated within the regulation. And so when you look at cybersecurity, state-of-the-art is an amalgamation of the different standards and guidances that have been issued by the different like regulatory boards, folks like the MDCG and the IMDRF. So we're starting to accelerate more and more. We get to 2019. We now have here in Europe the MDCG issuing a cybersecurity guidance, and we have the FDA most recently issuing a new pre-market cybersecurity guidance, all kind of culminating with by 2024 here in Europe, all the devices on the market that were certified under MDD, which is the previous directive, need to be recertified under MDR. All right. On top of that, we've got legislative actions. We've got the Cybersecurity Act. We've got NIS and NIS2 coming. So, and then we've got the Patch Act under the U.S. federal government. Did I skip? No, I didn't skip. Yeah. No. All right. And we're starting to see more and more emphasis, focused inclusion of the word SBOM. On the FDA side, it's part of executive order. It's part of the FDA's updated guidance. It's a hard requirement at this point. They're not going to certify devices that contain software that don't have an SBOM going forward. Here in Europe, it's a lot less defined. So if you look at the way that a medical device gets placed onto the market here, it goes through generally a device that is not a class 3 device will go through a notified body. That notified body will do the inspection. They will audit the quality management and the technical file of the device. They may or may not ask for a software bill of materials right now. We know most of the customers we're working with here in Europe haven't been asked or weren't asked when they did their original certifications of their devices. That stuff that's happened relatively recently. So depending on the notified body you work with, you may or may not get asked for a software bill of materials. We do feel like that's changing. And the reason we feel that is because folks like the MDCG and the IMDRF are starting to put so much more emphasis on it. So if you look at the MDCG's guidance, they're using terms like may include a software bill of materials. And there's a shift. So now we have the IMDRF notified bodies. 2019, the IMDRF This also includes providing the software bill of materials to ensure appropriate level of transparency. Again, still mainly optional. Then we see 2020. There's a roadmap that the IMDRF issues to sort of put together key milestones for the implementation of software bill of materials and medical devices. And now earlier this year, IMDRF issues a 28-page guide on the implementation of SBOM, and this now becomes incorporated into this concept of state-of-the-art under MDR, and we see that it's something that all the notified bodies will start to ask for more and more and more. And then we've got team notified body here issuing revised instructions to the various notified bodies under MDR saying you now shall take common specifications into consideration. So these new guidance has been issued. They apply directly to what the notified bodies are looking for. As recently as like 4 weeks ago, they're now being told you shall take this as opposed to you may. So there's kind of a big shift there, which we see taking place. Now, I just like the infographic. This is something we put together to try to simplify the various cybersecurity related standards, guidances, and sort of key legislative and data protection components of taking any type of Internet of Medical Thing device or connected medical device to market. These are the things you need to take into consideration. Here on this side, we've got what's happening in the US, things that are necessary in the US. Here on this side, we've got the European side of it, and things are aligned to kind of show how close they are to overall harmonization. Now, we kind of distill the key activities down to a couple key things on either side, pre-market. There's a number of things, but putting an SBOM together, that's going to be required. So before you get your device certified, you're going to have to show that you have an accurate SBOM. It's in a machine-readable format, right? You're doing some vulnerability management there. On the post-market side, it's about sharing and maintaining that SBOM. How are you making sure that you've got transparency between the stakeholders? Because that's the key thing here in the healthcare space. Why am I producing an SBOM if I'm already doing software composition analysis, I'm already doing vulnerability management? Because for hospitals, the way that they get transparency is by seeing that SBOM, is seeing what's in there. So the idea here being to build transparency from the device makers to the hospitals and the healthcare operators. There needs to be this transparent exchange of information. And there are some big device makers that are doing it already, like BD in Ireland has already made some software bill of materials available through their customer portal. So get to the software bill of materials and some of the key challenges here in the healthcare space, aside from kind of the regulatory frame, like the regulatory delays and kind of the lack of it being a hard requirement, which is changing. There are some other challenges, and I thought, we'll try to work through those. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on what the SBOM is. I think everybody's kind of covered that to a high degree so far today. This is just my little joke on what an SBOM is. So biggest challenges we see in healthcare really, I think there's things that people have already mentioned earlier. So third-party commercial software, those could be libraries, those could be applications, those could be operating systems, legacy devices, making sure the information in the SBOM is actually accurate, how people are adopting, implementing, using VEX, the actual accuracy of the vulnerability data, and then specific SBOM tooling. So,
can I quickly ask, do you see, for instance, in the hospitals or healthcare users in this case, are they using them? Are they doing?
Yeah, so I think this kind of, it's a point that I'll dig into a little bit more. Not really. So Log4j came out earlier this year, right? And we were talking to a hospital in Norway, and they had no SBOMs, right? No SBOMs from many other manufacturers because it wasn't required. And so they sent emails to all the device manufacturers that they had devices from to find out if anybody had Log4j in their device. And they got an email back from somebody saying, yes, we have Log4j, but don't worry, it's version 1, it's 10 years old, it doesn't have this vulnerability in it, right? So that's kind of the state of affairs of a lot of hospitals here in Europe. In the US, there's more, but even then, in some of the largest medical device manufacturers in the world are delivering SBOMs to the hospitals, and the hospitals are just basically sticking them on a shelf. So there are tools out there for the hospital's IT team to consume SBOMs and to do stuff with it. But then we get into the next set of challenges, which is I have a vulnerability feed. That vulnerability feed is giving me all this information about vulnerabilities that are in your device. And now I'm going to start hounding you because I want to know how you're going to fix this stuff. And you say, no, that's fine. None of these problems are an issue for me. And I'll get to that in a second. On the third-party commercial software side, this is an area where people are using reverse engineering, binary analysis tools, so on and so forth, trying to figure out what's inside some of these commercial software applications. It only works for some stuff. And it's a challenge, I think, really, for the biggest manufacturers who have devices on a lot of different platforms to be able to really populate that full SBOM with all the different components if they don't get an SBOM from the commercial software vendor. Hello. There we go. We're back. We're back. Almost. I guess I deleted my slide. Man, what is going on now? There we go. All right, I touched on this a little bit, legacy devices. This is data from MedTech Europe. These are the number of devices that are currently still under the MDD certificates. These are the number of devices that have been certified under MDR in the last 3 years. You can see it's not moving very fast. The deadline is 2024 for all those devices to get recertified. Right now, 90% of the devices in the hospitals are still considered legacy devices. I mean, it could be 89% or 91%, but let's go 90. And so there is there's still a big gap in terms of how much security risk management, cybersecurity work has gone into the devices that are out there versus where things need to be. And so we anticipate that there's going to be a big acceleration in the adoption of SBOM in the next 24 months as it becomes a hard requirement and as people have to recertify. And the notified bodies become a bit more knowledgeable on the subject, start asking questions. Where's your SBOM? Where's your vulnerability management process? All right, so let's get back to the conversation we just had. Unlike a lot of software, medical devices are a little bit different. They tend to be more black boxy than a router or PC or something that you can take the piece of software and you know exactly what's being used. In a lot of cases, the product security team, functional safety team will work together. They'll identify components that they don't need in a software library, and they'll remove that, or they'll make sure that it doesn't function if it presents a specific risk. So we know, the most kind of rudimentary way of doing that is people disabling Bluetooth on a device because they don't want to have to deal with the potential security risks from Bluetooth, or they just make it completely unconnected so they don't have to deal with any connectivity risks. But what ends up happening right now in some cases is you have a hospital team gets the SBOM, a new vulnerability comes in, maybe it's a CVSS score of 9 something, right? And so all of a sudden it's an all hands on deck kind of red alarm, and they're sending emails to the manufacturer saying, hey, we've got this new vulnerability, this is a big issue, what are you guys doing about it? And the manufacturer is saying, look, you guys don't have to worry about this, there's no problem here for us because we have this managed, we're not using that specific component, or we're only using this part of that library. And so, this doesn't present a risk to us, or this port's disabled, or there's a number of ways in which they've already proactively managed the security risk. And so this is an area with a lot of potential for kind of tension between hospital security teams and the product security offices in the medical device manufacturers. And this is something that VEX, as it becomes more adopted, will be able to help kind of reduce some of that friction. All right, other big challenges. And I think this is my last slide. So we know that VEX makes a lot of sense, but it's still very early. People aren't even doing SBOMs in a lot of cases here in Europe. So ideally, there'll be kind of the second level, the second wave of adopters, and so the tools will be better, and it will be something that is implemented a little bit in conjunction with people building their SBOMs and distributing those SBOMs. There's a lot of legacy vulnerability information out there that poses a real challenge for some of these legacy devices. So you've got devices that have already been out in the field for 15 or 20 years. They've got old pieces of software. It's hard to match those up to the CPE. There's not as much information out there about some of this legacy software and what's in these devices. So that presents a challenge. And then I think one of the challenges we've heard a lot about is there are not specific tools for SBOM generation for some of the vendor-specific IDEs and development platforms that the embedded device manufacturers are using. And so there's a lot of hand and manual work that goes into that. So like overall, kind of the top line takeaway is SBOM is coming. It's slowly getting there. We feel it's going to accelerate, but it's still early stages here in terms of the healthcare industry. Depending on who the manufacturer is, it's kind of the 80-20 rule. Most of the market isn't doing anything about it, or if they are, it's a printout they give to the hospital, or a PDF file, or an Excel spreadsheet. And some folks are very advanced, but they tend to be the ones that are operating in multiple markets. Yes.
How do you feel? So you mentioned healthcare, and how do you feel it compares to industry when it goes to adopting SBOMs?
I mean, I've had conversations with some of the largest medical device manufacturers that sounded a lot like the conversation we just had with Cassie in terms of what they're looking at for tooling. It's not operational. It's not weaponized yet, right? So, the largest medical device manufacturers, with the exception of a particular German one that I'm familiar with, are still putting these systems together in the back end. They're still evaluating tools. They're still evaluating, and they have a cycle, right, for kind of how they roll things out. And they're not happy with the existing state of tools. So, either they build their own stuff, they use open source stuff, or they wait and they deliver requirements to the tool developers to improve the quality of the tools.
And with regards to adoption, say, for example, how would you compare a hospital with a production company with regards to actually using SBOMs of their suppliers?
Maybe on the previous one, if I may, I've been talking to a couple of them. One, a very big Dutch medical device manufacturer that we all know.
Yeah, they're pretty advanced.
Yes. Okay. So they're one of the advanced.
They're one of the advanced. Yeah. And I mean, they've already started. They were working on VEX implementation last year.
Yeah, because they do a full retrograde on all of their medical devices. So that's hundreds, thousands of devices actually. Yeah,
and they have a pretty well-established product security team. They have a significant managed services group. So, I mean, I think they eat a lot of their own dog food, which, positions them slightly differently than some of the other device manufacturers who may focus on a specific, area. Like they may just build MRI machines, or, they may be doing ultrasound machines or something like that. And so their product security teams tend to be smaller or more spread out. They don't have a big centralized product security outfit like somebody like Danaher or Medtronic or Siemens or Philips, right? So they tend to have more strong kind of products. So, but once you get below kind of that top 20, 30 device makers, you see that there's not the same kind of product security infrastructure internally. You see that, especially the ones that are just European-centric ones, or they're only operating in Europe, they're not doing the things that the ones in the US are doing yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the hospital side, you've got kind of the gold standard, which is the Mayo Clinic, who's got their own kind of operating model for IT. And then you've got, folks like hospitals in Finland that have open Wi-Fi systems that are connected to their surgery rooms.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think one of the well, thank you very much for a great presentation as well, and I think also very inspiring also for the things that we would like to do in the industry. At least also making some comparisons, trying to get to the same level of data, because I think one of the challenges that we're facing really towards the end users, being it hospitals, being it manufacturers, utilizing basically different tool sets, is the need that they need to start asking, of course, also for the SBOMs.
Yeah.
But of course, they need to know what to do with it. So that it requires a level of cybersecurity maturity that's high enough.
I think there are some tools out there that hospitals are purchasing. There's a bunch of companies that have built these. They're like agentless SIEMs. They kind of sit there in the hospital and they claim to be able to snip all the traffic. They can't, but they're supposed to be able to kind of work magic for these hospital CISOs to be able to see all the vulnerabilities. And these are like, they're half great and half terrible, because they're the ones that are also generating a lot of the false positives around vulnerabilities in the devices. They've got old SBOMs in there, or they don't have an SBOM, or they've got an old MDS square, which is the manufacturer's disclosure statement around kind of the IT characteristics of the device, and they're flagging all kinds of issues and it's creating problems. In a perfect kind of deployment, they work well. And an imperfect deployment, they create more work and they kind of create noise that people have to filter through to actually find the problems. And it doesn't really solve the biggest problem, which is people clicking on phishing and spear phishing emails. And, that's still today's biggest issue, right? I mean, we're kind of a couple steps away from that when we're talking about a vulnerability on a black box medical device that's connected on a private VLAN. Yeah.
Sorry, but I think it's a dangerous wording that we're using, because yes, you're right. The most important, the most often case for impacts, negative impacts of is phishing and stuff like that. But still, there's always the option, and especially when we talk about network devices, they are using software, and they better should use good software bill of materials, because they are often accessible and big and things like that. And they are out there, they're exposed, auto pens, and they are running.
Yeah.
So I think it's absolutely essential to have the SBOMs, and they are addressing a very important space, but they cannot cover the whole problem. So we are not able to, with an SBOM, we will never ever protect people's misbehavior. What they can do, prevent us from harm. That's just
Sure. I mean, there is.
That's because I think when you say there's still this, so
no, I'm saying that in terms of priorities, right? For your average hospital CISO, the priority is how do we stop people from clicking on links that they shouldn't be? Not like, we've got an MRI machine that's 25 years old and it's got an old version of something in it that has a vulnerability, right? Like, in terms of where the hacker is going to get through, the much higher probability right now that they're coming in through somebody in the accounting department who clicked on get a free lunch at Applebee's email or something like that. I'm not discounting the importance of it. I think it becomes increasingly more and incrementally more important as we move outside of just the hospital environment and into remote care, remote surgery, remote, patient monitoring that becomes much more critical, and into value-based care, where you start including data that you're collecting from a person in how you deliver care to them, and then how also the reimbursement structure works. So there's certainly a lot of value, but it's still in its infancy in terms of how it's used and who's using it. And in terms of priorities, the CISO priority is it's ransomware, malware, and then we get further and further down into the OT stuff that's happening. Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you. Super.